I read some of the stuff you said about you don't think that we gave enough attention to finding Dylan yesterday. Are you kidding me? I devoted 2 hours of national television time to try to find your son.
Hello everyone. Today we'll talk about a strange story. It's about a 13-year-old boy named Dylan. His father said that Dylan was at home, but then he suddenly disappeared and no one could find him. Stories of disappearances are many and often mysterious, but this particular case caught my attention for several reasons. Dylan was born in 1999 and lived a stable life within an ideal family until when everything turned upside down. Dylan's parents, Mark and Elaine, decided to separate due to increasing conflicts between them. With the growing tension, divorce became inevitable. But there was a major issue: who would get custody of Dylan? Mark, Dylan's father, insisted on gaining custody, while his mother, Elaine, argued that Dylan was better off staying with her. The disagreement escalated to court. After several sessions, the court decided on a custody arrangement where Dylan's mother was granted primary custody while his father was allowed scheduled visits, weekly or monthly, depending on the court's decision. With these rulings, the problem seemed to be mostly resolved. On the day Dylan was supposed to spend a week with his father, his mother packed all his essentials, clothes and belongings, and took him to the airport, where Mark was waiting for him. The plane took off and landed in a remote snow-covered city where his father lived. Mark greeted Dylan warmly and took him straight to a McDonald's restaurant for a meal before heading home. That day, everyone was visibly tired from the travel, so they all went to bed early to prepare for the next day. The following day, Mark made sure to spend quality time with Dylan. They visited several places and explored nearly every corner of the area. By evening, they both fell asleep on the couch. When Mark saw that Dylan was sound asleep, he decided to take a short nap before lunchtime as he needed rest from the many tasks he had to handle. Mark woke up around noon and went to call Dylan, but he couldn't find him. Mark knew Dylan loved exploring and often went out without asking permission, but he would usually return within 10 to 30 minutes. So at first, Mark wasn't too worried and assumed Dylan would come back soon. Mark then left the house to run some errands in his car. When he returned at 2 p.m., he expected to find Dylan back home. However, the house was empty, and there was no response when he called out for his son. At that point, Mark began to feel that something was wrong. At 2:30 p.m., Mark left the house again to finish some tasks. Upon his return, he called out for Dylan once more, but received no reply. That's when he realized Dylan wasn't in the house, and something unusual was happening. Mark immediately decided to contact the police. In his call with the police, Mark told them that Dylan had been sleeping on the couch while he took a nap. When he woke up, Dylan was no longer there. Mark also mentioned that his son loved exploring, but had never been gone for more than half an hour. Over 3 hours had passed, and Mark was growing increasingly worried. Shortly after, the doorbell rang. Mark expected it to be Dylan, but when he opened the door, he found a police car parked outside. The police had sent a detective to follow up on the report. The detective noted that when Mark opened the door, he appeared unusually calm, something that stood out because people reporting missing persons are usually anxious or panicked, not this composed. The detective entered the house and started gathering information from Mark, such as the last time he saw Dylan and other crucial details. After collecting the information, they told Mark they would give the child about an hour and a half to return. If Dylan didn't show up by 4 p.m., they would begin a more serious search. Mark mentioned that Dylan had taken a fishing rod from the house before disappearing, suggesting he might have gone to the nearby lake. Based on this, the police assumed Dylan was fishing and would likely return soon. When 4 p.m. came, the police called Mark to ask if Dylan had returned home. When Mark said he hadn't, they began treating the case as a disappearance. Police officers arrived at the house and cordoned off the area. They started considering various possibilities, including that Dylan might have been abducted or harmed. The police searched the lake near the house, bringing in divers and experts to assist. The search at the lake lasted 3 hours, but no trace of Dylan was found. With no evidence of abduction or any signs of him nearby, the police suggested that Dylan might have headed toward the nearby mountains. The search was further complicated by the severe cold weather and heavy snowfall, which made it more challenging to locate Dylan. The police continued searching for over 12 hours, but found no leads. On November 19th, 2012. The day ended in great disappointment after every possible location was searched with no sign of Dylan. In the final moments of the search, the police decided to use trained dogs to track Dylan's scent. They asked Mark to bring the blanket Dylan had been sleeping on so the dogs could catch his scent and begin the search. Once the dogs sniffed the blanket, they left the house and started following the trail. However, the dogs stopped at a specific point just outside the house. The police were stunned. What could it mean for the dogs to stop tracking the scent just a few meters from the door? This suggested that Dylan hadn't left the house on foot, but had likely been taken by someone. The police hoped that Mark's house had surveillance cameras, but unfortunately, there were none installed. More than 2 years passed after Dylan's disappearance, during which time Mark appeared deeply concerned. He repeatedly expressed his fear that someone might have entered the house, taking advantage of Dylan's social nature. Dylan was known to be very friendly and would talk to anyone without caution. However, the police found no evidence or fingerprints in the house other than those belonging to Mark and Dylan. As time went on, suspicions began to shift toward Mark himself. Mark noticed this and started appearing in numerous media interviews, trying to defend himself. He would say, "I know they suspect me, but I have no reason to abduct or harm my son. I fought hard to gain custody of him and went through many court battles for that reason." He also claimed that Dylan's mother was the primary reason for their separation, saying, "She was selfish. If she hadn't been, we could have given our son a better life." Despite the suspicions surrounding the case, there was no conclusive evidence to implicate Mark, which kept the investigation shrouded in mystery. Over time, by 2013, after 7 months of intensive searching with no trace of Dylan, the police noticed some compelling evidence in Mark's home dating back to 2012. However, the strange part was that they hadn't confronted him with this evidence at the time, raising many questions about why they delayed reopening the investigation. In 2013, Mark became the sole suspect. The police decided to interrogate him extensively, and one of the key questions was how a child could disappear in such a manner without leaving any trace. If he had been murdered or abducted, whoever did it must have been very clever. During the investigation, detectives noticed small bloodstains on the sofa, walls, and floor of Mark's home. When asked about the source of the stains, Mark claimed they were possibly from a minor cut on his finger or an injury sustained while using a fishing rod. However, the bloodstains showed clear signs of attempted cleaning, which raised further suspicions. Even so, the police couldn't prove anything against Mark, especially since he had an alibi at the time of Dylan's disappearance. But some inconsistencies began to surface. Mark had initially stated that Dylan took a fishing rod and went to the lake, but Dylan's mother insisted that Dylan didn't know how to fish and had never shown any interest in it. The case became even more complicated when Dylan's mother revealed that Mark had once threatened her, saying he would kill both her and their son. These statements prompted the police to take the case more seriously, but even then, there was no concrete evidence to charge Mark. Each year, Mark insisted that he was the better parent for Dylan, claiming he understood what was best for his son more than Dylan's mother. On the day of the crime, Mark sent some messages but refused to discuss them, saying, "I'll let you read them for yourselves." Dylan was a kind and easygoing child by nature. He loved video games and enjoyed playing with his cousins, who adored him and often played together. But then, the unthinkable happened. During the search, the police and volunteers stumbled upon something horrifying. The snowy terrain of Colorado had preserved some evidence, but the body they found was headless. Dylan's head had been severed, and his bones were scattered across the area. A bone was found about 900 meters from Mark's house. The police assumed that wild animals had consumed parts of Dylan's remains, carrying his bones over long distances. Even more bizarre was the discovery of one of Dylan's fingers far from the rest of his remains, raising numerous questions. Near Mark's home, there was an old shed that had been locked for years. According to the police, the lock was covered in rust, suggesting it hadn't been opened in a long time. After much effort, they managed to open it, but they found nothing significant inside. More than 2 years after Dylan's disappearance, the police remembered they had never searched Mark's car. They went to his home and inspected the car's interior, but found nothing unusual. However, they noticed a piece of cloth stuck underneath the car. It turned out to be part of Dylan's clothing from the day he went missing. This piece of fabric, stuck under the car for over 2 years, became the key to unraveling the truth. Mark, when confronted with the evidence, confessed to everything. The scenario proposed by the police was that Dylan had been kidnapped and killed, and his body was disposed of far away. Alternatively, they speculated that Dylan might have attempted to escape and fallen from a high place, leading to his death. When asked why he killed his son, Mark initially tried to deny it, but the evidence was too overwhelming for him to evade the truth. During a search of Mark's home, investigators found a laptop hidden under his bed. When they accessed it, the browser history revealed searches for video games and other mundane topics. However, the shocking discovery came from the photo gallery. The images included Mark dressed in women's lingerie and others showing him consuming the contents of baby diapers. These discoveries added a disturbing new dimension to the case, revealing strange and grotesque aspects of Mark's personality, which made the crime even more perplexing and horrifying. The story took a dark turn when it was revealed that Dylan had accessed his father's computer and seen the disturbing photos. These images horrified Dylan, prompting him to confront Mark. A heated argument ensued, with Dylan provoking Mark while Mark tried to remain silent. The confrontation escalated tragically when Mark grabbed Dylan and slammed his head against the wall multiple times until blood splattered across the room. Realizing he had killed his son, Mark decided to cover up the crime. Mark loaded Dylan's body into his car and drove to a remote area. As he was about to dispose of the body, he noticed that Dylan was still alive but in critical condition. Instead of trying to save him, Mark chose to end it. He drove a short distance away, then repeatedly ran over Dylan with his car until he was certain of his death. Afterward, Mark beheaded Dylan to make identification impossible and disposed of the body in a gruesome manner. In 2015, Dylan's skull was found in the mountains. It was shattered, indicating it had been struck with great force. The skull became the last heartbreaking reminder of Dylan's life. The photos Dylan had seen on his father's computer were deeply disturbing. They showed Mark dressed in women's lingerie, hoarding baby diapers, and consuming their contents. These shocking images were the catalyst for the tragedy. After committing the crime, Mark took his truck and fled to another state. The police tracked him down, and after several hours, they located his whereabouts. The moment of his arrest was captured on camera, and the footage was harrowing. Mark attempted to justify his actions, claiming he had lost control after Dylan saw the photos, but his explanation was far from convincing. The day before Dylan disappeared, Mark had sent a message to Dylan's mother using his son's phone. The tone of the messages was unusual and different from Dylan's typical writing style. The mother suspected that Mark, not Dylan, had sent them. The last message from Dylan's phone was sent at 6:07 p.m., further raising suspicions about Mark's involvement. In 2017, after years of suspicion and ongoing investigations, Mark Redwine was arrested and charged with the murder of his son, Dylan. His trial was delayed due to numerous legal battles and the COVID-19 pandemic, but it finally began in 2021. The trial lasted for a long period, during which the prosecution presented strong evidence that led to Mark's conviction for second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. His conviction marked the culmination of years of seeking justice in a case that shocked the public. Among the evidence linking Mark to the crime, investigators found Dylan's blood in his home, suggesting that the murder occurred there. Additionally, the scent of Dylan's body was detected in several locations in Mark's home, including his truck, further raising suspicions of his involvement. Furthermore, in 2015, Dylan's skull was found, and medical tests revealed that the skull had been subjected to blunt force trauma, supporting the theory of murder. The strained relationship between father and son, partly due to Dylan discovering embarrassing photos of his father, may have served as a motive for the crime. Mark's suspicious behavior during the investigation, such as changing his story multiple times and failing to participate in the search for his son actively, also contributed to the evidence that linked him to the crime. In the end, Mark was sentenced to 48 years in prison. At the time, he was 60 years old, meaning he wouldn't be released until the age of 108. Mark's house became abandoned, overgrown with plants and trees, silently telling the story of a tragedy that would never be forgotten. Ultimately, Dylan's death was a direct result of uncovering his father's secrets secrets he never expected to find. This discovery led to a fatal confrontation and a shocking crime. This story is not just about murder. It's a sobering reminder of the importance of addressing psychological and personal issues before they escalate into tragedies that destroy innocent lives. What do you think? Were there early warning signs in this story that should have prompted intervention before the catastrophe? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. For those who want to hear this story on Spotify or dive deeper into the details, you can get the full ebook, which contains additional events and exclusive insights not covered in this video. You'll find all the links in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more gripping stories. Thank you for your support, and see you soon in a new tale.